Well, the first best-selling book chronicling the most painful chapters in Carol Kent's life journey, When I Lay My Isaac Down, begins with this quote from Olympic runner Eric Liddell. "Circumstances may appear to wreck our lives and God's plans, but God is not helpless among the ruins." Carol continued to share the God of hope at work in the ruins of her only son's murder conviction and life sentence with A New Kind of Normal, another bestseller. Well, she's now living between a rock and a grace place, and she wants us to help us find, as she has, divine surprises in the tight spots of life. Carol, oh, this is such a treat. I can't even remember what year I met you.
We've had a long friendship.
A long friendship, but it was another life.
It was.
It really was in another life.
A forever ago.
A forever ago. And yet you have taken everything that God has permitted in your journey and made it a blessing for others.
Well, I wish I could say I made it a blessing every single day, Moira, but there are still so many days that I weep over what happened. And I know some people are meeting me for the first time today, but we raised an only child who was an absolute delight. He had a sparkle in his eye. He was in Little League in those early years and got involved in his church youth group and went on missions trips with his youth group buddies, and
he was a happy boy.
He was a very happy boy. He was president of the National Honor Society in high school, and he set his sights on getting into the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. And after he received that appointment, we were so excited about what his future would be. And soon after graduation, he was in Orlando in nuclear engineering school, and he joined a great church where he met a girl in Bible study. And I'll never forget when he called home and said, "Mom and Dad, my orders have changed. I have to be at Surface Warfare Officers School in Newport, Rhode Island on September 8th. April and I are in love, and we want to get married next Friday so we can go together." Well, we talked them into being married with the accountability of family and friends around them in our hometown, and it did not take me long to love April. She'd been married at the age of 16 to a man 10 years her senior. She'd been through a lot of abuse in her lifetime, and behind them in walked little 6-year-old Chelsea and 3-year-old Hannah. And we had a glorious time as these little girls invaded our lives. And I remember once given permission, they went into my closet and put on long skirts and beads and stiletto heels, and they would put music on and twirl around our home. And I could not believe that I was becoming Grammy Carol on the same day I was becoming a mother-in-law. But life was good, and we were looking forward to seeing this young family thrive. So Moira, a year into their marriage, we began to realize there were some issues involving the biological father. Our son was unraveling mentally, emotionally, spiritually, as the father of the girls was trying to get unsupervised visitation. And we received one of those middle-of-the-night phone calls that no parent ever wants to receive. Our son had been arrested for the murder of his wife's first husband. Believing that this supervised visitation would no longer be in place, he took matters into his own hands and shot and killed his wife's first husband. And he'd never been in trouble before in his life. And we began our journey that we call being between a rock and a grace place.
That was October 24th, 1999.
Yes, 11
Jason.
years ago.
11 years. Where's that time gone?
Oh, and Moira, during his first week in the jail, he was beaten mercilessly. I'll never forget the call that came. He said, "Mom, I've been jumped by 10 inmates. I was kicked and kicked in the face." He said, "My 2 front teeth have been broken off." And he said, "I have a cut in my ear. They stole everything except my Bible." And you only get 15-minute calls, and then the call is cut off. And I heard that guttural wail come out of the depths of my being as I sat at my desk sobbing, and I said, "God, I cannot do this journey. I cannot do this." And we began a 2.5-year journey through 7 postponements of his trial before he was finally convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
And I remember being in that waiting room with the appeals, praying as many were, and then the door closed.
The door closed.
All hope of any
Yes.
appeal now is exhausted.
And I have to say, Moira, that we were given a year ago in July, when Jason's application for clemency made it to the top of the pile, we were given hope. The Florida Parole Commission recommended that his case be heard before the Executive Clemency Board in the state of Florida, but you need a waiver from the clemency aides to get that hearing. So Jean and I went to the state capitol and presented the case, and I can tell you I felt the favor of God in that place as questions were asked about what Jason is doing now, and he's mentoring inmates. He's taken 8 groups of men through a financial peace university course, teaching them how to balance a budget, and he's been at work doing some pretty amazing things with Bible studies and prayer groups. He has a group of 12 men he fasts and prays with over the needs of their families and their personal needs. And Moira, as we finished at that clemency hearing, the aides asked if we could put together letters from people who had been positively impacted by Jason's life, and we said yes, and they said send it to us before we make the final decision on the waiver. So for 2 months we collected letters, phenomenal letters, about how Jason had led men to Christ and how he had profoundly encouraged inmates and their families. And 3 days later we received a rubber stamp denial that his case would be heard. And the next day was a visit day, and Jean went in early and gave him the news, and I just couldn't bear to face him yet, and I didn't go in until noon, and I was sobbing. I mean, I was a blubbering mama, and I got in, and Jason put his arms around me, and I was sobbing into his shoulder. He said, "Mom, if we'd gotten the clemency hearing, we would have thought it was because we had the best attorney. We might have thought it was because we had the favor of politicians." But he said, "Since it's been denied, I know that God says I haven't been here long enough." And he said, if that never happens in this lifetime, and God knows I can serve him better on the inside than on the outside, he said, life is over like this, and then we'll all be home, and I'll walk in freedom then.
Without a doubt, heaven has become a very real hope for all of you. You're such a woman of spiritual strength, Carol. And yet to read in your book, you say, "I now believe it is possible to die of a broken heart."
Yeah, I used to sort of have a pride issue about not crying over everything. Now I have kidneys next to my eyeballs. And I really believe that there are things that happen to us, and most of our viewers can identify with great losses, relationship struggles, children born with disabilities, some with incarcerated loved ones, some who had a man promise to love them forever who walked out on them, and it's been so hard. And I think there are many who cry a lot, but you know, the Bible says in Psalm 34 that God is close to the brokenhearted. And I weep a lot. I'll walk by a closet and see a naval uniform, and I'll remember better days, or I'll hear a song on the radio that reminds me of my son, and I'll think, oh, life used to be so good. But you know what? Life is good now when I have the right perspective.
Carol, where did the first glimpses of divine surprise break into the devastation, the broken dreams, the reality that was now your new normal?
Well, when you're living in a life that's so different from what you expected, you have to look for God's joyful splashes, his divine surprise in the tight spots of life. And the newest book is really based on Romans 9:33, and a paraphrase of that is, on the road to Mount Zion, there's a rock in the road, and you can't get around it, but the rock is me. If you look for me, you will find me on the way, not in the way. And as we've hit obstacles in life, we are pressing into the grace place. And